good morning. I've tested this Bluetooth headset. Sounds pretty good. Hopefully when it gets saved and uploaded, it doesn't get worse. Thought I'd do a quick little podcast. I've actually been continuing to translate Nietzsche's Zarathustra. And I'm not sure where to start. I mean, jeez. Like, I don't know if I mentioned it, but ever since I started sharing some of the Nietzsche stuff, viewership on the YouTube's just died. Not on the podcast platform. Still the same number of people watching. I love you all. But on YouTube, I went from hundreds or thousands down to 1.20-something people watching the videos. I mean, that's over a 48-hour period. I mean, that's about how many were watching it 60 minutes prior. So there was this podcast. So here's a little time filler. There was a podcast, and the question was, who's an expert? How do you trust an expert? And I love that because I've mentioned this before. This call to authority has gotten so bad nowadays that many people will call to an invisible authority, or worse, someone who is definitely not an expert. Right? So what is an authority? What is an expert? What is scholarship even? Because I've mentioned this in Nietzsche scholarship. I'll just as often come across someone who will say something that is just absolutely wrong. Easily understandably wrong. But neither here nor there. So my first response was the issue is complex, meaning multifaceted, right? All new ideas are denatured by the marketplace. That's, one of my favorite quotes from Nietzsche's also sprach Zarathustra. Great ideas need an advocate, right? You philosophers are known for being militant about their own ideas, right? Zealots, because you have to. Because, as I mentioned near the end, Proust was the only person who saw the potential in his writing. Nietzsche was almost exclusively the only person who saw the importance of his writing. Right? So I mentioned Socrates as a common example. Right? This issue may lie in the recent AI discussion. My wife asked, why are they so excited? Doesn't the internet do these same things? And I said this offhand comment was perfect. The issue is laziness. It's not that it's doing anything new, it's just something different. Right? And what I said was, the issue is laziness. Who wants to parse the first page of a search result? I chuckle. What I mean by that is I hear people say, your answer's on the first page. If you're on the second or third or fourth, wow, you're really desperate. And I laugh because I'm sure many of these people I'm sure they've never really explored the search results, but I laugh because I'm sure many of them have never experienced not getting any search results. I just had this yesterday when I was looking up the etymology of the word pornography as it relates to James Joyce, who said that anything done not for art's sake, right? If something's done strictly for commerce, he says it's pornography, right? And if you look at, again, Greek, pornoi, this idea of being, you're denaturing your art, you're selling yourself short, you're almost like a prostitute in a sense. But he doesn't mean it in the pornographic sense. He means it in the sense that you've missed your opportunity. And it's even sad and disgusting that you don't take the opportunity to write something beautiful, something special, something creative, something wonderful. Right? So I said, the issue is laziness, right? Who wants to parse the first page of search results? And I made a joke. I said, get me my Wall-E zero-gravity chair. Because I said this when Wall-E came out, that it was a portent. And I can't believe how right I was. The fact that people would become so lazy that, they're living in a fantasy world. And I went on and I said, you must live the happy fiction. That's from Jung. But not at the expense of another. That's Buber and Jung. What this writer missed was that we would come to a point that we also dislike our own self so much that we would make choices contrary to all benefit and productivity. And so the podcaster asked, like, what is productivity, right? Because he sees from his comment he might be losing some passion in what he's doing, right? The motivation. So I said, what quickens the pulse? What is productivity? What is purpose? What quickens the pulse? What you have passion for? What you create for creation's sake? As James Joyce said, anything less is pornography. In Greek, this word is the idea of wasting your talent by simply selling it to the marketplace, rather than to create and bring into the world something new, or something wonderful, or challenging, or unique. Follow your bliss, as the Heart Sutra guides, often seen as the distillation of non-dual thought. There is no attainment. Any great pursuit must be in the cause of the endeavour alone. Any great pursuit must be in the cause of the endeavour alone. The marketplace of ideas denatures all. Thus, why we must be our own greatest fan, as Proust was his own critic and fan. In time, others will judge our value for us. We must decide the value for ourselves. We are the evaluator. Or as Hemingway said, it is not honorable to be better than any other. It is only honorable to be better than your previous self. Some people break in this leap of faith, but many are stronger in the broken places. I wrote about a recent discussion that I watched where Bishop Barron was asked what he would say to those without faith, right? Not someone who disbelieves, but just someone who is unsure, uncertain, doubts. He said that faith provides a guide to meaning for those who cannot decide for themselves. He implies that deciding for ourselves what is right is too hard to maintain. Or is it just the challenge? Is the challenge of this experience to maintain that gauge, to be constantly aware in Sanskrit, Pali, sati, sampajanya, Sanskrit, smrti, sampajanya. Don't quote me on that last one, but the idea of constant, ever vigilant mindfulness with the mind that it's not about the self, impermanence, all of this mindfulness, not just of your current experience, but of the reality, of the nature of self, all of these truths that we hold dear, I guess would be the cliche. And so Bishop Barron, I think, left something to be desired, left something on the table. He said that faith provides a guide to meaning for those who cannot decide for themselves. He implies that deciding for ourselves what is right is too hard to maintain. I argue it is until you build up this mindfulness. St. Teresa of Avila wrote about this, that faith is like a garden. And it takes a lot of work to get it going at first, right? You got to bring in the water. Then you got to till the soil. Sometimes you even have to bring in the soil, and then plant, and then tend. So it's a process. It's a stage, and we must stage the process, right? So I say, to always be optimizing our experience, and in the process we may find ourselves. Sorry about that. Timer went off. So I said to always be optimizing our experience. That's what I was talking about when I mentioned the sati sampajanya. It's know thyself, but also know thy experience, because there is no separation from the self and the experience, the self and the other. I mean, it's all a process, right? To always be optimizing our experience. And in the process, we may find ourselves and define this relationship that is our community. Sangha in Sanskrit, ecclesia in Greek. It is the community, the group of like-minded individuals trying to do better. They don't have to be of the same faith. They just are of like mind, of being good for good's sake. There can be no I without the other, right? You can't find who you are outside of your community, your culture, your identity is your other. It is I. It's the sixth sutra of the Isha Upanishad, that the secret is to see the self in the other and to see the other in the self. That is this entire individuation process of Carl Jung, to find out who you are, or as Austin Kleon would say, fake it till you make it, right? You have to try to clone your idol, and in the failure to clone them is where you realize the true nature of who you are and what you want and where you want to be and where you want to go. So I go on, and my comment says that this means that we must take risks, and be willing to be disappointed, to fail, and hopefully learn in the process. I said religion is the path you follow with devotion and confidence that allows you to act without fear of regret, for you acted with the best intentions. And then I dropped the definition of religion, because most people don't look past the first one. Maybe it happens to be the third. Religion, a noun, a cause, principle, or system of belief held to with ardor and faith. So that's why I change it to devotion, confidence, and commitment. I like devotion, confidence, and commitment, because I feel confidence and commitment are two separate. Devotion and commitment, not the same thing, right? I think that's where this confusion, in Sanskrit, bhakti is devotion, but it's seen by many as a blind faith. But never should faith be blind, right? If we go back to the Latin, fides, right? It's not sola fides, not faith alone. Faith needs to be part of this. It's the same as imagination is not our sole guide. We use memory and cognition together to bring logic to bear. And the same process with faith, right? There is a certain amount of trust, right, which faith, fides, has a cognate in Latin, trust. But again, this is more along the lines of Schrodinger's cat, or the tetralemma, or the cetoscoti. It's not blind faith. It's just a simple truth that we will never be able to know everything, and certainly not know what we don't know until we do. So that requires faith, even in science. There was a discussion yesterday that you can't separate science from philosophy, and I just chuckled to myself, because as a philologist, your question answers itself. Philosophy, philosophia, and science both mean the same thing, essentially, right? More commonly understood is philosophy, right? Philosophe in French, or back to Greek, philosophia, right? The love of wisdom. But the same can be said about science. Science comes down to us, again, from the Latin, where the root word means to know, to understand, to come to understand, knowledge. Phronesis in the Greek, anumana in the Sanskrit, induction to the philosophers in English, this idea of knowledge, like the eureka in the bathtub of old, this idea of knowledge from the ether. But as Nietzsche said, we have so little confidence or faith in ourselves that when we come to an idea that is so new, so different, so unique, challenging, enlightening, that we don't give ourselves credit for being able to have come up with something so fantastic. So we attribute it to some sort of higher power, or an external consciousness, an external power, right, of Jung or William James or Nietzsche. Nietzsche wrote about this in Zarathustra, this idea that I think it might have been in The Birth of Tragedy. He's written about it in a number of different ways, this idea that we have so little faith in ourselves. Arguably, that's what the Übermensch is. He said, man is a bridge, right? That we're meant to get somewhere. And we are that tool, right? We can be our greatest hindrance, but we are the greatest tool. And one of the greatest is this mind, this cognition. And so the greatest risk is not taking a risk, right? Nothing has destroyed potential more than doubt. Failure could never hamper our experience as much as our own self-doubt can, will, and has.